Well, hello, we are out here in Mom's backyard. And it is that time of the year where we're getting into kind of the early summer garden season. And now every so often I'm going through and assessing maybe areas I need to fill in, maybe a plant that didn't do well or needs to be replaced, or just areas I never really finished off, which is kind of what we're doing today. And I'm over in my mom's backyard. And this is I did this garden, a lot of it last year, and I did a lot of it with you where I planted a lot of perennials. This is all along a big windrow of Techni arborvitae. That's what the green big trees are. And they're, getting around to their full size, but they'll keep growing, of course. And in front of them, I have lots of beautiful perennials planted here. So I have a few I want to fill in with, and they're the ones I love to use for texture, pops of color, and you can see them actually behind me. It's that chartreusey green. Let's go take a closer look because they're one of my favorite plants to use in the garden. So as we walk up to this area, you can see the pops of green from far away. Now all this stuff is just about 1 year old, so it's still pretty small, but it's gonna get a lot bigger. We have firelight hydrangea, so they'll eventually get that, 4 to 5 foot probably in this area. And that will be really nice because they are putting their blooms on for this year, but I can't wait for them to get bigger. And then we have right here, what I'm gonna talk about right now, which is, I love these. These are Sun King Aralia. And what I love about them is they have this bright, beautiful foliage to them. They do bloom, but it's kind of more inconspicuous. You grow this for the foliage. And it can take that part shade, it can take some sun, it can take slightly drier conditions once they're established, and that's why I love them. They have this beautiful color, and when you back up against that dark green backdrop, and then the green of the perennials beside them, they just pop. So I want to add in a couple more of those. I'm going to add in one on each side here of this urn. I planted this urn a few weeks ago and it's slowly coming up into its glory. I love the different things in it that are looking so good. But now I want to plant a couple more of those Aralia. So I'm going to go get those and we're going to put those in. So I'm going to grab my plants. I always have a water dish for Kip wherever I go. So Kip can always have his water. So we're gonna grab these two beautiful plants. What I love about certain perennials is just how good they are at just giving some contrast in the garden. So these are gonna go right here in these perfect little spots that will really then pop out behind. So they go behind things like this beautiful turkey rhubarb, which is a gorgeous ornamental plant with lots of foliage color. You can see I recently mulched and need to blow off the debris. So what I want to put in this hole first is always some biotone. So let me go grab that. You all know my love for biotone. I love to use it because it really does just help get things kind of the start they need in the hole. So it helps their roots just really get acclimated and get more vigorous root growth in that first year. And that's why I just always use it. And pretty much with everything I plant, I'll put some of this biotone right into the bottom. So we sprinkle that in and then we can pop out one of our Sun Kings. Now, some people call this spikenard too, but it's just a gorgeous, look at that color, and it has a nice little sawtooth edge. It's one of those things that anytime I plant this in the garden and I'm doing stories or videos, people always pick that out, even if I don't talk about it, and say, hey, what is that? So I'm gonna just break up the roots slightly. These are not too compact. So I often will talk about, if you see roots that are really tight and compact, I break them up. This one you can see is pretty loose. It's easy for me to manage, so I don't need to do too much work to it. I do make sure to always start with a well-watered plant. I never like to put a plant into a hole dry. That's gonna be a lot harder on the plant. So I am gonna just then break up the soil that I displaced and just gonna put it back around. Now I did recently mulch this, so I tried to spread the mulch out. I usually like to do most of my plantings before I mulch, but I mean, come on. If you're anything like me, you're always gonna be planting something, so that's never gonna be fully an option. Just slightly press it in. We don't wanna make it too tight, but we do wanna try to get out any air pockets that would be in there. That's pretty good. So now I'm gonna do the other one and then we'll water these and we'll move on. So now I can just go in and water it. Now, the important thing to remember with watering, it isn't just to water the plant. It's also to make sure we get out any of those air bubbles that are inside around the roots. You don't want those to be in there, so that's why we make sure to water something well. So even though this was a small, about 1 gallon size container that I just planted, I like to water it at least probably 2 gallon when I'm planting it to make sure that all those air pockets get out and it's well saturated. So I watered both of them. And a good thing to remember too is, so these are only a couple feet apart. So the other one's right over there. We're talking, 5 feet maybe. They had drastically different moisture levels in the soil. The one over there I could tell was a lot drier. than the one here. So you need to watch all your plants and not just check one in a flower bed and assume you know how all of them are gonna be. You have to go around and check each one. So these are well watered. And but while we're on the subject of this color, I love using these all gold Japanese forest grass, Hakanakloa. You know, what's beautiful about them is they're really carefree. So they like some good shade. So I have these on a north side where they get some nice morning sun and late afternoon sun. So they're never getting the harsh summer sun. And they stay somewhat on the more moist side. Obviously, if we get into a drought, I may have to water them, but otherwise they just do well on themselves and they get this gorgeous foliage. So let me show you once they grow. So these go along the front of Mom's house, and you can see I have Bobo hydrangea, I have boxwood, and then I have the Japanese forest grass. And these now have been probably in 4 or 5 years. Look how large they get. They get so much texture, and they're really striking from the road. So soon here in about a month, these Bobo hydrangea will just be loaded with blooms, profusely blooming, and then they'll have the evergreen behind them of the boxwood. And then this stays this beautiful color all summer long and just has this striking contrast in textures, which for me is just really pleasing and really excites me. So what I do is need to work on an area down here. You can see, and it could be because of the sun, but a couple of them just weren't doing well. And so I'm gonna just replace them pretty much with new ones and hope, so you can see these do really well. And so I'm hoping, I want just a whole little grove of them at the end that kind of is a gracious corner. So I got a couple more. I mean, seriously, these are, to me, so easy. There's also a variegated variety. I have found that one to be not quite as easy as this one. See how perfect that is? So now I can just cover it back up. This is on the end where it doesn't get quite as shaded as the full north. This is getting a little bit northeast. So I can tell it's probably a little drier here than it is with all the other ones that are really getting big. So that could be a reason too. So I just need to plant the other one and we'll be good to go. Okay, so now I just need to water these in well. And hopefully these will now take off like the others have. I mean, you know, it's one of those things where you never know for sure. Each area of your garden could be a little bit different and it can't be perfect. And what does well one place may not always do well another place. But I think here, with a better start, these should do pretty well. And then eventually there'll be a nice big kind of mass planting here of that texture, that green, which really sets it off. Which you can see here's another place that I used the Sun King Aralia. Now this gets even more shade than the ones I just planted in the back, but they still have that beautiful color and get really nice and large and just great foliage. So I think it's a fun play to kind of have different colors with different textures and plants, and it really plays off on each other. So I'm gonna grab my stuff and we're gonna go plant an elderberry. So I used to be someone that thought I didn't like elderberry. Years ago I had a black lace elderberry and it got out of hand, and I had it in a spot that really it needed to get a lot bigger and have more room, and I tried to confine it, and then I thought it didn't work out well. Fast forward to right now, I'm starting to kind of love the black lace elderberry, and I think it just needs the right spot, and it needs to have room to be able to really branch out, have that great shape to it. And I finally found a good spot, I think, on the west side of Mom's house, because we've been having kind of an issue. It's a decent amount of shade, it does get some sun. Elderberry can take some shade, which is good. It also can kind of be an area where we don't necessarily want just an evergreen like a yew or a boxwood. I want something to have a little bit more interest, maybe some color, some texture. The elderberry blooms in the spring. It has great color, and I want to show you why I think it's such a unique plant. So the spot it will go in is just right up here. So we have her whole front porch planting all along, and then we have this spot. And so right here, right now it's a smaller plant. I just picked this up the other day. But look at these beautiful leaves. That's why it's obviously called black lace. Now, someone recently told me they like to think of these as kind of the same texture and idea as a Japanese maple, but hardier. And you know what? I actually think that's a great explanation of them, because they have kind of that open, beautiful leaf shape, kind of like lace, but then they're a lot hardier. These can take a good beating, especially in the winter where I'm gonna put them. They can do a lot better. And you can see here on the tag, they get blooms in the spring, and then they just have this great color year round, which I think is really fun. And so that's what I'm pretty excited about. What I also like is that it can get some good size to it. So this can get 7 foot plus. And in this area, I really want something that will get that size. I want something with good heft, you know, that will really kind of anchor this whole corner inside of the porch. So I'm excited to actually put this one in. And I think it will finally be, if you're like me, maybe sometimes plants seem to not work right for you, or you don't get out of them what you want, but I think it's because we try to wrangle plants more than we should, and we need to let them be. And this is a spot now where it will just have full reign to get as big as it wants and just be. So I'm gonna pot this one up and put it in the ground. So of course, to finalize it, need to water it well. So the important thing, I think, anytime we're doing shrubs, trees, whatever it is to really make sure you're not planting it too deep. Now, you've seen me do this on trees. I talk about the root flare on trees. You can't really do the same. You can kind of do that on a shrub, but more important, just don't plant it deeper than it is in the container that you purchased it in. Kind of make sure that the bottom of the root, where it goes into the ground, is exposed, because if you bury that, it can really suffocate a tree. It can cause more disease. You really just want to make sure you plant it at that proper level. And then, like I'm doing, you want to mulch up to it. So I'm just putting that mulch back around it. That's going to really help retain the moisture here. And eventually this tree is really, I know it doesn't look like a tree now because it's going to be a large shrub, but it's going to really start growing here in the next couple years. And what's fun about these is they're pretty quick at growing, and they'll really take off. And then as you back up, eventually this whole area here, this corner, will just be filled with that gorgeous texture and color. So I'm pretty excited about seeing this one go, but we have a couple more things quick to put in the ground. I know, I went plant crazy, but 'tis the season. Okay, to finish up the planting for today, I am back out in that back flower bed. And here at the end of the flower bed that's towards the road is eventually what's gonna be kind of a screen or a roadblock to the whole backyard. Mom has a fire pit back here that we like to use. The backyard, you just want some screening from the road. So slowly I've been planting. You can see some trees out here. We have some oriental spruce, we have some blue spruce. And now I want something to go in front of them that will kind of help block, the vehicles, the noise, all that goes on past here. But I wanted something with interest, so I'm picking a willow. I don't usually do willow, but I love the texture on these, and I think it'll just be nice to have some type of variance in the garden. So we're talking about this area, which it's going to be evolving, obviously, because things really need to grow in too to really understand. But we have a couple bottle brush Buckeyes, which if you don't know what those are, they're a native. They're super cool. They have a really great kind of like almost a leaf like a scheffalera. You have that 5. Do you see that? See how they come up and pop up? It's almost like a scheffalera, really. But they're really cool. They bloom later in the summer. They're growing up from the bottom this year because they kind of got knocked back by the winter. But eventually these get pretty big, so they'll fill in space. We have the trees. On the other side, we have some hydrangeas that will get big. But what I want these now are these kind of really fun willows. So do you see how it has a unique color to it? It's kind of a bluish green. It has that beautiful silvery kind of powderiness to the leaves, and then that reddish stem. So it's really pretty, adds some great interest. And then down here it kind of has that great shape to it. So overall it will have a really spherical shape, but it also gets kind of large. So we're talking like that 4 to 5 foot. So this is a dwarf blue leaf Arctic willow, or also called a nana. And I'm just really excited to have 3 of these here. And eventually probably what I'll do is intersperse it obviously with some perennials in between them. But I want to put these in today just to get that going, to get them in the ground. And eventually then they'll have this beautiful shape to them. And look how they kind of just like dance in the wind. I love when texture can do more than just be for looks, but also just kind of add that interest. And these have some really beautiful fall color too. So we have some great seasonal changes. So I'm going to clear the mulch away from these 3 areas and pop them in the ground. I wanted to bring you in close for this last one. I have the biotone in the hole, but what I wanted to show you was these are a little bit tighter. So I pop these out of the container. If we lay it over, we can see, look at all those tight roots. And it's actually hard for me to break that up with my hand. So some people think, well, what's the big deal? Just throw that in the ground. While that could work, the problem is this is so tight that one, it can be hard for it to truly absorb water, but it also is hard for these roots to want to branch out into the native soil and get new root growth going because they're so tight and compact. It's almost like they have a memory and they don't like to branch out. So sometimes what I do when something's like this is I take a big sharp knife. So this is like a freezer knife, they're called. They're from like the 50s and 60s. And I just make big cuts around it, kind of like relief cuts. And what this does, no, it does not hurt the plant. And if you want proof, I've pretty much done this to anything around my yards and nothing has ever died. What this does is it creates these relief cuts all the way around it. And this will just help so the plant is able to branch out new root growth in this new native hole. And so that's exactly what we want. We want this plant to realize like, oh, I want to put roots into the soil. I want to start soaking up nutrients, moisture, and all of that. So that's why I go around and I do that. And then you can see, you can start kind of just roughing it up a little bit. You don't need to be too drastic, but honestly, you can be extremely drastic and that will not care at all. But that's pretty much all I need to do is just those cuts, kind of probably a couple inches deep, and then rough it up, and now pop it right there in my hole. See, it really is super easy, and these little things make a huge difference for the plant. Now this area has some really adequate moisture, I can tell, and it's actually retaining really well, and that's probably from all the mulch I've had on, because I had this mulch on a lot earlier than the other. I'm of course finishing up by watering them all. You know, the thing I think with a garden is hard is the patience. So once we plant something, usually it's on a smaller size. So, you know, this was like about a probably 2-gallon size container. So you can't imagine sometimes the size something's gonna get, but you have to be patient and know that these really are gonna get that size. And honestly, willow are pretty quick growing, so it won't take too long. In a few years, these will have a lot larger shape to them and they'll really start anchoring this area. And I think I'm gonna love them so well, I might start adding some in some other places too to kind of make it more cohesive. Well, I have more things to go plant. I have some perennials to go plant along the large perennial bed down by the stone wall. But I just want to take you along on some of these things and show you the things I'm picking, the things I'm using, and why. Because I think the big thing with gardening is we always think there has to be some big secrets, there has to be some perfect answer. And a lot of times there isn't. A lot of times it's just trying what works in your garden, in your area, because each climate can even be a microclimate and it can be different for your garden or my garden. But it's fun to kind of see what other people are doing and experience what they're doing. So maybe you get some ideas, maybe you get some inspiration. So as always, share these videos around because yeah, that helps me a lot, but it helps other people see this is super doable. If I can do this, anybody can do this. This is a farm in Iowa, but you can do this in your yard too. So until next time, I'm gonna go plant some more because what else would I be doing?